Yo, 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 happy day, happy day. This your bruh, True Jew, tapping in with you for another informative message, another message of truth and light. Look, lately I've been thinking about John F. Kennedy. Yeah, our dear 35th president, JFK, aka Jack, who was assassinated in cold blood in front of the nation on November 22nd, 1963. Look, what's really up behind this assassination? I know a lot of people like to focus on the actual film shooting, and I'm going to touch on that in a minute. And there's other people who feel like he was assassinated because his family's previous history during the prohibition, the alcohol prohibition era of this country, when they were running a lot of booze and a lot of moonshine and distributing it throughout the country. Now, he was placed into the presidency because his father was owed some favors. That's true. He was placed into the presidency because all of the individuals that preceded him in high office dealing with his father and his family were under the assumption that he would be able to play ball, according to what, the good old boys club was talking about back in the day. But John Fitzgerald Kennedy, he was a man of a different set of moral. And when he actually got into the presidency, he was made privy to a lot of information that had been declared top secret. He was made privy to a lot of information that when he found out about it, it didn't really sit well on him to conceal this information. Before he was president, he was a very well off young man. He came from a well off family who made a lot of money doing certain things. One of those things were, of course, running the booze during the Prohibition era. But once he got into the presidency, he had this sense of, I want to say, a moral desire when he found out this information that he was made privy to share it and dispense it, not only with his family, his siblings, he was one of many siblings, but he also found it important to distribute this information to the American citizens. Now, you have to understand something about John F. Kennedy. He was preceded by Dwight D. Eisenhower as the 34th president, okay? And John F. Kennedy's vice president was Lyndon B. Johnson, who ended up taking the presidency after JFK was assassinated. Now, JFK has a famous speech, okay? It's called The Address, The President and the Press. And in that speech, many who are aware of this speech and what he said in it, especially certain key parts, they're aware that it could have possibly been what he was alluding to in this speech that ended up getting him killed. Now, I'm going to read a part of this speech real quick. Now, excuse my JFK impersonation, but I'm going to give it a shot. So it sounds something like this. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. He then goes on to say, we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence. Now, if you go and read that whole, if you go and read that whole speech and consider that he was killed shortly after, you might be like, huh? What in the world is bruh talking about? Well, let me get to it. Dwight D. Eisenhower is one of the key individuals in this whole scenario that was the reason that JFK was assassinated. You got to remember, before a president is elected, the preceding president always has a file, always has information that's shared with him that he has to study, he has to learn, and many times has to keep to himself or within his cabinet, within his group of higher ups with him. Well, when a new president comes along, they inherit the previous president's information and intel, and they're allowed to read over it, especially back in those days. Since the JFK assassination, presidents after JFK, depending on how well they play ball, will or will not get certain pieces of information, even if those pieces, of information exist. But JFK was one of those presidents who was able to get his hands on the information. Now, what's this information? Dwight D. Eisenhower's presidency consisted of some really supernatural events. Dwight D. Eisenhower, when he was president, was the president during the Roswell crashes, the so-called Roswell crashes. He was also the president during one of the first contacts with an alien entity. Now, these aliens, I'm just going to cut straight to it. These so-called aliens were not of the good sort. Okay, they were of the bad sort. As a matter of fact, they were demons in disguise. They were demonic entities in disguise as so-called gray aliens or so-called aliens that seemed to come with a sense of technology that could help aid the United States along, or the United States government and military complex along. There were promises and deals cut without the American citizens' knowledge that the United States government cut with these entities, very spiritually based, that would cause these entities and to give them access to certain citizens of the United States in exchange for this high form of technology that ramped up the United States government's ability to compete with other world governments at a time when we had things like the space race beginning to take off and things like atomic warfare being implemented in the land, nuclear technology. Now, this is very important because these demons, when they cut these deals, they essentially tricked the United States government governing officials into making these deals. And a lot of these deals are still in place to this day. At the same time, the United States government was also in cahoots with what we call the shadow government. Now, the shadow government is now being ran by the military for the shadow government would be considered NATO today. Okay, so you have the World Organization, that whole situation right there, where all the different countries of the world get together and they conspire together. Well, there's a shadow government that works in conjoinment or that works together with the world government, with NATO forces, and it's that world shadow government that JFK was seeking to out. It's that world shadow government that if you continue to read his address, his president to the press address, you'll see that he's alluding to this shadow government, which is behind the scenes, which no longer needs to have, for instance, troops which march across borders or warfare by daytime, and instead is replaced by guerrilla warfare and secrecy at night, or replaced by the injection of media propaganda to control the masses in that form of fashion. So JFK, he was totally against this idea that those devices should be used, especially on United States citizens. He was very specific about how he worded things, but he could have said against all world citizens, but he chose to focus on United States citizens. And that's where we see the statements of, the very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. Well, that free and open society, in his mind, was the United States. So the shadow government, knowing that eventually with JFK's prominence, with JFK's ability to articulate, he would eventually out them. And it's not like, if you're watching me right now, maybe you do believe what I'm saying to be true. But who am I? You know what I'm saying? In the big scheme of things, who is True Jew? So when you look at what I'm doing on my platform within the YouTube sphere and platform itself, versus a president of the United States, which the whole world will listen to, you see the influence is kind of different, at least for right now. So the point is, when JFK got on that stage and he began talking and speaking, those in control behind the scenes, those who were really in control, knew that they had to get him out of there. Now, when it comes to that assassination on his life that tore through Dallas, Texas, and he was riding in that limousine, there were a few shots that went off. And the first shot that hit him, it did hit him, but it wasn't the kill shot. Now, the famous kill shot, where if we go back to the footage and we see his brains being blew out and all of that gruesome stuff. I put a disclaimer out there. If you go to watch this footage, maybe put the children to the side, be prepared to see some gore and some real gruesomeness. But the fact of the matter is, much of the footage has been edited today. So you have to be very choosy on which form of footage you see. But he was riding in the limousine, okay? And the limousine had three sections to it. There was the driver and passenger side. Then there was a middle row section with two individuals in it. And then there was he and his wife in the back, JFK and his wife in the back. Now, if you look very carefully at that footage, I'm going to imagine that I'm the guy sitting in front of JFK. The kill shot was fired off by him. The guy turns around. Now you're seeing me faced on footage. JFK would have been sitting right here next to this guy. And the guy, he pulls up a pistol very carefully as he's acting like he's looking at JFK. And he, boom, he fires the pistol and blows JFK's wig out. Okay? His brains splatter everywhere. And you have to be careful not to listen to anyone else's narrative when you watch this footage. Just take what I'm saying and then go watch the footage. And if you get the right footage and you slow it down and zoom in, you'll actually see the pistol being pulled. You'll see a glare from the sun catching the black pistol. And then you'll see smoke coming up from the shot, coming up from the bore of the pistol where the shot was fired from. And then the agent carefully pulls back like this, and he faces forward as if nothing happened, or like he's afraid for his own life. But it was he who, in fact, shot JFK just like this, in between the door. My arm is the door. This would be the seat belt. Okay, so I'm doing my best to do it from y'all's view. This would be the seat belt that comes over. He took his left hand, and bam, he fired. So I'm doing it this way. He took his hand, shot the shot, and blew JFK's wig out. So that's who really fired the kill shot, a person in the vehicle with JFK. But nonetheless, those alien entities, those demonic forces, were the primary catalyst and reason why JFK was getting ready to out the shadow government. Now, if we fast forward in society, we see that not only is the shadow government real, but they've created agendas like Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, which the World Organization has already stated about a month ago that they're fast forwarding, that they're pressing forward because they want this agenda to speed up. We see things like the Georgia Guidestones, for instance, down there in Georgia, which detail an initiative that they've set up to reduce the world's population to 500 million people. So if we're at a population of 7.5 billion people or so and growing, they want to get rid of about 7 billion people so that they could keep the world at a 500 million and then institute the new world order in the form of a one world government ran by a fascist police state, and the rest of the economics and jobs and all of those sorts of things will be controlled by robotic symbiotic bodies and robotic technology that will keep on pushing things forward to produce for the 500 million people who are left on the world. Now, your brother True Jew ain't worried about none of that. Even though they do have the means right now to push forward with these things, and they do have the demonic spiritual technology that they are continually increasing, like the D-Wave computer chip, for instance, which brings in the demonic energy and then houses that demonic energy within symbiotic bodies. Bodies that are made underground, just think like that movie I, Robot with Will Smith, except those were more metallic, bodies. But they do have fleshly looking bodies, synthetic flesh bodies that these demons will go into and be housed into. And they've already pretty much mastered the technology in that respect. So these are the things that JFK was wanting to out the shadow government is doing. And we see the effects of that, not only his killing now, his assassination, but also the effects of that shadow government working consistently to produce the consequential effect that JFK was talking about. So that's why JFK was killed for real. And the kill shot, once again, was the guy right in front of JFK who fired that shot and blew his brains out next to his wife. Then, of course, Jackie Kennedy, his wife, was threatened with death and her children's death. And because of this, she went into hiding. She married a billionaire guy. She went into hiding and she continued to raise her children until JFK Jr. was a grown man. He was made privy of this information. He formed a publishing company, a magazine company that was very popular throughout the world at the time he was alive, a young, strapping young man. And then he was killed and assassinated in his helicopter one fateful day. He would have definitely outed the reason that his father was killed. And you notice the rest of the Kennedys had a lot of issues throughout life, and it's primarily due to what they were told from their brother. okay, and the information that they were supposed to conceal. Robert Kennedy was also assassinated because he understood and knew what his brother John F. Kennedy was going to bring forth. So look, this your brother True Jew. You know I'm hitting you with this truth the only way I know how, raw and uncut. I know it's a sensitive subject. Many people talk about it, but I don't think many people understand or overstand the angles that were involved with that assassination to our dear 35th President John Fitzgerald Kennedy. Look, you know I love you to light always. Most High Mama Papa willing. I'll be back with another one. And until then, gone.